Good evening, and welcome to an exciting Saturday night in Jay Heisler's apartment here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Today we're going to talk about absolutism and war in the 17th century, a chapter chosen for the teaching the textbook assignment for the class of Dr. Suzanne Marchand. Is actually Dr. Marchand's textbook that she co-wrote, Many Europes. So the chapter is Absolutism and War in the 17th Century. A very exciting topic for me because my major research paper, my term paper for Dr. Burstein's class is actually 17th century United States, the early colony in Virginia of Jamestown. It's a period that I find very interesting, and as we progress you'll see why. So for the first portion of this, we'll be looking over what the total chapter contains in 5 points, and then we'll move on to a simple lecture on the Baroque period, particularly the High Baroque period. The first point of the chapter is, for the 17th century, political absolutism, which is autocracy, the concentration of a lot of power into the hands of just a few. Key examples of this include France under the rule of the Sun King, Louis XIV. They include as well Austria and under the Habsburgs and their holy war against the infidel Turks. It's worth noting that, of course, there are other empires outside of Europe during this time. This includes the Ottoman Empire and the Chinese Empire are very notable and very expansive empires competing with Europe. This includes as well, this period of time, the consolidation of Prussia, and most important for my overall dissertation research and academic career, Russian expansion of territory. This is the century in which Russia, under, of course, a very autocratic and very authoritarian and very absolutist leader, expanded its territory all the way to the Pacific through Siberia and became the great power that it is today. The second takeaway from the chapter is the 30 Years' War. The third is Baroque culture, the subject of today's lecture. The fourth is non-absolutist exceptions that flourished during this time, including Venice and the Dutch, both very exciting parts of history, and both containing stuff that I find really interesting. A lot of great art came out of Venice and particularly Dutch Europe during this time. The fifth and final takeaway from this chapter is the English Civil War, which of course had a great importance to the American colonies and a great remaining importance to the British today. I was lucky to catch a screening of A Field in England as it was released, and there was live drummers and there was live cameras to the main studio in which it was being shown, and it was a big cultural event made by a celebrated local indie filmmaker, and it's about the English Civil War. And while they don't see it like, say, the American Civil War is seen here in Louisiana in the South, they see it like maybe the Revolutionary War is seen by Americans as an important part of culture and an important part of history, and you can have a sense of humor about it, and you can celebrate it, and you can make films like A Field in England about it. Well, the High Baroque period is important for having two very concrete themes that have remained in modern art, and that includes the fact that it is apocalyptic, and that includes as well the fact that it is absolutist. Both apocalyptic and absolutist themes have remained popular, but they were very typical of the High Baroque period, and it helps explains my interest in it. Early Baroque period before this was more extravagant and gruesome as the two main takeaways from it. The High Baroque period was a period of time in which, whether you choose to lump it in with Baroque or not, you see some of the great works of art and philosophy, including William Shakespeare, actually, in England. It is worth noting that the Baroque period was Catholic and Protestant, and was very prominently religious in character. The religious character of it did kind of change as absolutist dictators and the absolutist state poured a lot of funding into it, and a new wealth being created helped redirect it, along with absolutist funding, into more what the textbook refers to as more worldly concerns than just religious material. So this is a period of time in which you're seeing yesterday's poor being today's rich, and you're seeing today's government become more autocratic in nature. But the core relationship changing here is a shift of cultural prominence from just the Vatican and just the Catholic Church and what is today Italy, to all over Europe, and as a regionalization of culture. Everybody can have their own local culture instead of just writing and communicating in Latin. It's a revival of speaking in your local languages, and any country in any area, any region could have produced the next great philosopher, the next great artist. But this is hardly a time of collapse or decline for Italy and Southern Europe. Some of the great works were created during this time, including Vivaldi, which is the soundtrack to this lecture. Vivaldi being an artist that I actually developed a great deal of interest in before this lecture. Vivaldi is very appealing to me, and I think it's a happy coincidence. I think the whole period of time across the board I find very interesting. Now, Eastern European culture as well flourished during this time. It's worth noting that under the Holy Roman Empire, Prague and Poland were part of the cultural winners of this period, of the High Baroque period, and the Holy Roman Empire expanded across a great deal of territory. The Emperor Rudolph II accumulated academics, but lest you think he's doing so for today's intellectual pursuits, this was often in pursuit of the occult. It was as well a boom for theater and art and architecture that made it as far away as Goa and Mexico. And so while many parts of the world were benefits of the High Baroque period, it is of course worth noting that India and Mexico had culture that existed there before. The political philosophy under this time, while after Machiavelli, still contained a great deal of pragmatism, being under an absolutist state, and a series of absolutist systems. This includes Thomas Hobbes, who I'm a huge fan of, and Hobbes's work kind of shows what happens in political philosophy under absolutist government. It also included a time of great increased literacy for the masses, in addition to increased wealth. Mostly religious texts, but also joke books, almanacs. It was a time where education became more universal. It wasn't necessarily utopia, of course. This was in the middle of the witch craze. Witch burning and the witch hunt had started 2 centuries earlier with inflammatory texts, and lasted well after, deep into the Enlightenment. It appears that appeals to authority with the High Baroque period, and appeals to reason, appeals to the glory of your own culture and to that of your civilization, were not enough to end mass hysteria and mass violence that turned out to be later developments of scientific progress and greater prosperity and social advancement in the name of freedom, liberty, and the Enlightenment. So that concludes the teaching the textbook assignment for Dr. Marchand's history class here at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. I look forward to hearing the response.